Today we're going to be talking about a wonderful show by Adam Harrison at the Maximilian Contemporary Gallery in San Francisco, California. It's a show of landscape paintings, but I've not come across in a long time such refreshing, uplifting paintings, landscape paintings by an artist. They're truly very contemporary, and not good because they're contemporary, but because they have a freshness about them that I've never seen before. We can look back into art history and kind of make comparisons to other artists in the past, but these again obviously have some influence by other artists, but they're really kind of very unique in terms of the way he paints. I'll tell a little bit about the background of the artist and the works. Adam Harrison was predominantly painting cityscapes for many years, some landscapes, but during COVID he was kind of almost forced to kind of move out to the countryside and do landscapes. So he painted a lot of, he went to Coral Canyon pretty much every day in Santa Monica and began his paintings and sketching. Now, they seem very kind of, the paintings seem very immediate, but I know that he spent a lot of time mathematically making sure everything was proportioned in the correct way, measuring distances between mountains, tops of mountains, bottoms of mountains, what's in the foreground, what's in the background. So creating a kind of the bones or a kind of skeleton of what he wanted to paint. Obviously, going there pretty much every day, these landscapes change day by day and season by season. So basically, an artist has the ability to kind of paint or an impression of what he sees as an artist, but the landscape also changes the artist. And I think you see this very much in Adam's work, this relationship between the kind of almost spiritual element, if you will, or ethereal element of the landscape that he views, and then how he views it and interprets it, that relationship. So again, a lot of these paintings you kind of really see the structure of the landscape, obviously in this one, whereas we go to some of these small ones and they become almost abstract. So when we say landscape, abstraction, these are just kind of art terms. It always kind of reminds me, I mean, this is not a landscape, it's a painting of a landscape, or the impression of the artist of a painting of a landscape. When we get into this kind of idea, or this kind of, we follow this kind of path, it reminds me always of the famous painting by the surrealist René Magritte, who painted a painting of a pipe and said, "This is not a pipe," meaning that it's not a pipe because you can't smoke it. So it's the impression of a pipe. Then, well, it's the artist's impression of a pipe. So that's basically what we're seeing with Adam's work. It's kind of very unique vision, and as I said earlier, a very contemporary vision of doing landscapes. If you look closer, you'll see that the background, they're almost all white, they're all painted white first. So these works tend to emit light rather than reflect light. And obviously we do see some of the kind of ideas of, not the ideas, but the feeling of maybe the Impressionists or Van Gogh in some of these paintings, but they've done in a very different way, because as I said, structurally and mathematically, he creates everything that needs to be there for the painting, and then he has the excitement of applying paint and enjoying that kind of the excitement and that enjoyment of being an artist and applying paint to canvas without having to kind of think of too much of the structure of the painting, because the structure is already there. Again, I hate going back to kind of references, but some of them, to a certain extent, remind me of the Dutch painter Mondrian. And most people will be aware of Mondrian's work as being very graphic, primary colours, just a few squares on a canvas. But they were actually reductions of paintings of trees or landscapes that he reduced and reduced and reduced to its most simple form. And I think certainly in some of these paintings, we go around to something like this, still has a kind of landscape form, but again moving into kind of almost pure abstraction. And it becomes very exciting, and I think very, I think it must kind of excite the artist, and kind of working back and forth between those ideas and see how far he can push it until something kind of almost ceases to become landscape and becomes something completely unique in itself. The paintings, having said that, the paintings are very, very enjoyable. They're uplifting, they have an ethereal quality to them. They just light up the room. So we see this wonderful kind of rhythm and actions of paint where the artist is obviously really enjoying what he's doing and really having a really good time. And we look at, it's almost like, again, we're looking at maybe Seurat and pointillism, where he's putting splashes of colour slightly different in different parts of the canvas, or on this case a board, where the colours are very fresh on the canvas, but they're not mixing on the canvas and going muddy. They're mixing in your eye when you stand back from them. So when we get up very closely, we do not read this as landscape. We read it as abstract forms and splashes of colour. It's only when we stand back that it kind of becomes something different. So if you could go close up with the camera and then begin to understand what we're talking about. Strangely enough, because of the way he paints, or the way he structures his paintings, and becomes that is very kind of mathematical and technical about proportion of the paintings and in the landscape. It just reminded me of one painting, a little anecdote by Burne-Jones, who was a pre-Raphaelite, and wanted to paint this biblical scene of the scapegoat, and he went out to the Middle East and got a goat and kind of stuck its feet in the sand so it couldn't move. At the same time, he was being attacked by tribesmen, but the goat died. Then he had to go back and get another goat and finish the painting. But it's again that dedication to getting things exact and exactly as you want them. And even the painting by Burne-Jones, the kind of landscape is kind of has a similar kind of feeling. But again, Adam is very, very precise about how he structures his paintings. But then that's in contrast to this kind of wonderful looseness and the enjoyment of painting and understanding that this is paint. It's not a landscape. You can't feel the heat of the sun. You can't feel the breeze of the wind. It's a painting of his impression of a landscape, but it does it so wonderfully well and contemporary. We'll look at this big one here, and it's almost creating codes for different for the skies, codes for the vegetation and the water. And then we can look at some of the other little paintings. I think this one's particularly exciting. And then the little print here, which again becomes more and more abstract if you get up kind of very, very close to that. So looking at this painting, we're looking at it, and from where I'm standing so closely, I cannot see the kind of landscape elements of it, just points of reference and colour and abstraction. And this was actually, this was a study for a larger painting. But what Adam has done here, all the kind of reference points of heights and mathematical relationships between hills and the sky has already been formulated. And here, if we look at this, this painting here, this is the finished painting, which becomes more landscaped. Well, the reference to landscape is much easier to see because it's done tighter. We get back at it further and we see that kind of wonderful structure of the landscape there. I love what's going up here in the sky with that white background and then just little splashes of purple and almost yellowy gold there. Lovely, lovely painting. And similarly, if we look over here, we have this relatively small painting here, which has obviously more of a landscape element, but this study, so basically working everything out beforehand on this beautiful little study. And then we have the very large painting, the largest painting in the show that the other painting was a study for.